Good morning, everyone. I'm Lori Lowell, and I'm the Executive Director of Home Haven. And this is a Home Haven Health and Wellness presentation. And I am right away going to turn this over to Pat Jackson Allen, who is the chair of our Health and Wellness Committee. And just a quick thank you to you, Pat, and your committee for putting together these wonderful presentations for us and for all the work you do. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori. And I am delighted to meet for the first time David. We've been communicating, I think, for what, 9 months, a year, but have never met each other or even seen each other on Zoom. So I'm delighted to meet you this morning. David created a small bio for me, and this is what he said. Dr. David Sofer has been a practicing therapist since 2000. He founded his physical therapy practice in Brooklyn, New York, in 2005 and grew it until 2016, when it was acquired by a large private equity PT practice called Motions Physical Therapy. He is an adjunct professor at SUNY downstate and Touro College physical therapy programs, and continues to treat people in his Brooklyn office. In 2021, he founded Arthritis Help, LLC, to empower people to self-manage their arthritic conditions through online educational tools. And you can learn more about these educational tools on the link that he will share with you in a minute. I first heard about Dr. Sofer's work from our Home Haven president, Carrie Triffin, who said, I heard this guy at LLR and he was ILR and he was wonderful. We need to get him to talk to our group. And then I had to find out who you were through all the channels of ILR. But we were successful and you were willing to speak to us. And he is also going to be speaking at ILR again in April. And I hope that he will tell us a little bit more about that for those of us who participate in the ILR program. So David, nice to finally meet you, and I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Nice to meet you as well. And thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak with y'all. Yeah, so I've been a practicing therapist for 24 years now. And I've really, in my career, I started kind of on the sports side of things. And then in my career, I really got into arthritis care. It became a passion of mine. And really because I think the arthritis community is rather underserved and I don't really love a lot of the advice or treatment that I see given out online or even by my peers, unfortunately, sometimes. So I set out to change my small part of the world and kind of give my point of view. So the way we're going to do today's session. So today's session is going to be predominantly about sitting. So how to sit more comfortably or less strenuously. And then we'll get into sit to stand a little bit. And so how to get out of chairs a little bit more easily and strategies to use for that. So all you need for this is a chair, hopefully one that's more firm. A chair with wheels is a little more difficult to do the sit to stand work just because it slides around, but still everything will be applicable. And that's all you need. Yes, so I am with ILR, and I'm doing a 3-week series with them starting on Fridays, April 5th, April 12th, and April 19th. So if you don't get enough of me today, you can check out the ILR catalog and meet me again there. We'll do some similar things and then some things a little bit different than we're doing today. So I'll get right at it and share my screen. Oh, so what we're going to start with is just some general information about arthritis. And then we're going to talk about some anatomy. And then we're going to talk about, I think, what people don't talk about enough, and it's understanding how you move and movement patterns. And then we'll get into doing some of the work where you get into your head and kind of start to learn about yourself. So I'm going to share my screen just so we can get right to it. All right. Okay. So the company that I founded is Arthritis Help. On my website, arthritishelp.info, you can find more information than you ever wanted to know about me and my life, my history. But also I post videos very similar to what we're going to be doing here recently in a little bit shorter form that cover a whole variety of exercise for activities, from getting out of chairs, getting up and down from stairs, getting more flexible, some things about strength, some things about balance, and all that is on there, and all that is free. So feel free to go into it. I also have a Facebook group and a YouTube channel. You can find me on there. And if you want, on my site, you can subscribe and you'll get my emails when they come out. I'm on hiatus for a while, but I'll be coming out again every week with new videos for you guys. So you can find me at that site, which is on this home screen there, and we'll throw it up in the chat at some point. And if you ever wanted to email me, Dr. Dave at arthritishelp.info, you can find me there. Okay, so today, what we're going to talk about is about osteoarthritis management. And I focus predominantly on osteoarthritis because it is the most pervasive type of arthritis, but the things that we're doing can be effective for autoimmune arthritic conditions as well. So, so if that's the category you're in, I've got you covered there. We're going to understand a little bit more what arthritis is and the process by which it occurs. And then we'll learn how to stop or slow the progression of osteoarthritis over time. And then dispel common myths surrounding arthritis, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I think it's important to get a better understanding about what the truth is and what's just kind of conjecture. And then we're going to talk about understanding the difference between movement retraining versus strengthening. So two different kind of strategies, both important, but the movement retraining piece often gets overlooked or underserved. And then we'll learn some movement patterns to reduce joint strain for this course, specifically in sitting and sit to stand. And then finally, all throughout, if you have a question, just shout it out. I'll get to you, but we'll have some time for Q&A and some discussion for anything that that kind of strikes you. So if you want to save your question for the end, you can. But if you want to get at it right away, you can do that too. So, you know, what is arthritis? So very simply, the actual definition of arthritis is inflammation to one or more joints causing pain and stiffness. That's it. And I know arthritis is a very charged word. I've certainly met people that when they get this diagnosis, they become sullen, they become scared, they think all sorts of terrible things about being in wheelchairs and all this stuff. And all it really means is that you have inflammation in one or more of your joints that cause pain and or swelling. And that can be from a variety of reasons. And so it is not by any means, a determinant of what your future will be. There's a lot of management strategies that we can talk about, but it is pervasive. It's the #1 cause of disability, and it affects nearly 60 million adults. So, so if you did recently get that diagnosis, you're in a large boat with a lot of people. You're not alone, and even affects 300,000 children. Not osteoarthritis, but other types of arthritis. And there are over 100 different varieties of arthritis that one can have. So we're going to talk about osteoarthritis, or OA. If I say OA, I'm referring to osteoarthritis. It's the most common type. It's commonly thought of as the wear and tear type of arthritis. And it's what people usually think about when they talk about arthritis. And oftentimes it comes on as we age and progresses as we age. Doesn't necessarily come on because we age, but it does come on as we age. And I'll talk about that distinction in a little bit. But other types of arthritis that you can have is autoimmune inflammatory arthritis. There's tons of types of that, but the most common one is rheumatoid. And that's basically where the body's immune system is attacking the lining of the joints. But you can also have infectious arthritis that would be treated not by me, but by your physician with antibiotic or antifungal treatments. And then there's metabolic arthritis, which is usually referred to as gout, which comes from like a buildup of uric acid in the body. So there's different types of arthritis. I just want to be clear that I'm talking about predominantly about osteo. And so let's talk about what a joint is if we're talking about joint arthritis. So a joint is simply where two bones meet. So if two bones come together, we consider that a joint. And we have lots of different joints, types of joints in the body, but the ones that get arthritis, we call synovial joints. They're joints that allow for movement. There are other joints that don't create movement. We're not going to worry about those today, like your teeth or the sutures in your skull or anything like that. But mostly we're talking about knees, hips, elbow, neck, back, all that stuff. And now synovial joints have cartilage, right? And that cartilage is a slippery tissue, a very slick kind of film that covers the surface of the ends of the bones, reducing friction between the two bones as they move. So all joints, whenever there's movement, they have a synovial joint, which means that each end has this slippery substance on each side. And that synovial membrane lines the articular surface. And then you have synovial fluid, which is this clear, thick, slippery type of fluid that's secreted by the synovial membrane. And so that's kind of, that's the oil itself. That's the lubricant itself that reduces joint friction. So when you have somebody with arthritic changes, they're having a reduction or a wearing away of that synovial membrane, which houses the fluid, and then they can't get as much fluid to the joint, and then things become stiff or painful, don't move as smoothly. So in addition to all of that, in every joint you have a ligament, and so a ligament is just a strong tissue that acts as a tether that connect two bones together to provide stability. All different joints have different types of ligaments and move in different ways. And finally, there's a tendon, and the tendon is the thing that connects a muscle to the bone. So ligament connects bones to each other, and tendons connect muscle to the bone to allow for power, to allow for strength when you're moving. So I just think it's good to define terms, so that way if I throw these things out, you have kind of a clear understanding of what I'm talking about. Oh, and finally, I forgot the bursa. So a bursa is, if you've heard of bursitis, that's an inflammation of the bursa. And so the bursa is just a sac of slippery fluid that tendons sit on top of. So when the tendons glide back and forth, they glide with less friction. Friction creates inflammation, and inflammation creates pain. So in the body, it's always trying to find ways to reduce friction, and it does that through synovial fluid and through the bursa. Right? So if we're looking at a knee, this is a side view of the knee, and I chose the knee because it's a very pretty joint, but also because it is a very common place for arthritis. So if we're looking at the knee, this is a side view. This is the medial side, so the inner side, and this is your thigh bone, and this is your shin bone. And you could see all along the edge of the bone where the two bones meet, the blue represents that synovial membrane, right? So that's your slippery looking fluid. And then you have the kneecap here, and you can even see the back surface of the kneecap because it slides up and down on that thigh bone, also has slippery surface, that synovial membrane. These are tendons that connect your quadricep, your big muscle of the front of your thigh, into the knee. And then here you have ligaments that hold the knee together. And the knee joint is unique in that it has a different type of cartilage called meniscus, which is a fibrous disc that also sits between the two bones. So most joints don't have this meniscus, this fibrous disc. They just have the slippery synovial membrane, but the knee joint has this meniscus, which adds extra support, extra cushion, and more lubrication to the joint. And so this is the knee when it's straightened out, and this is the knee bent, and you can see how the joint kind of slides along the bottom, right? How it slides along that tibia there. Okay, so healthy joints all have nice, smooth, regular articular surfaces. So articular surfaces are where the two sides meet, right? And it's nice, smooth, regular. They have intact synovial membranes. Everything is pristine and producing that synovial fluid. And they have good mobility. The ligaments move well. The muscles are strong, and the joint moves easily. So healthy joints all have similar qualities, right? But painful joints or arthritic joints all have their own specific aberrations. So things that are healthy tend to look generally the same, but people that have problems, all their problems are unique to themselves, just like in life in general. So it's okay to compare with your peer group what you feel and what you have, but just because your neighbor has arthritis and you have arthritis doesn't necessarily mean you're in the same boat. So comparison is okay, but it's not the end all be all. So if we're looking at, we've got a healthy joint on this side, less one on this side, you can see that you've got kind of spurring or osteophytes that occur at the bone. You've got this cartilage lining that starts to deteriorate. And so you'd see that this knee joint wouldn't bend quite as easily as this one because we don't have smooth, easy surfaces and we don't have as much lubrication going on. So the bad news is that all this stuff, when it happens, is not reversible. It does not heal. Cartilage doesn't heal on its own. Spurring does not go away. But that does not mean there is no hope. There is plenty that we can do. But right now, that does not heal. Perhaps in the future with regenerative medicine, there might be a way to reverse that. But as it stands at this point in time in 2024, that does not exist. Right. So I think it's important to understand how wear and tear occurs in order to understand how to change it. Because it's not just use, right? It's not just what you do, but it's how you do things. So wear and tear is not inevitable. So when I say that arthritis occurs as we age, but not because we age, it's not an inevitability, right? We can move in ways that preserve joint integrity, and we can move in ways that are very difficult on the joints. So the body tissues in generally are very resilient and excellent at accommodating specific types of forces. But when we have the body takes forces that are different than what the way the tissue is resilient, that tissue starts to break down. So if we're consistently loading a tissue in a way that it's not designed to hold, that tissue will break down. But if we load the tissue in the way that the tissue was designed to take force, that tissue will stand up for a long time, which is why people can do amazing things, which is why ultra marathoners can run 100 miles and they don't break down, because they're loading their body in the way that their body is designed to be loaded. So just for physics, there's 3 different types of ways that a tissue can be loaded. There's tension, which is kind of like a pulling apart, right? There's compression, which is like a squishing together. And then there's shearing, which is rubbing back and forth. And shearing is usually the problem. That's kind of the devil when it comes to joint health, too much shearing force. So when we think about what tissues are capable of doing, bones are extremely resilient to compressive load. So bones, thankfully, can take that squishing force, and there are scaffolding, right? So if the weight comes down on our bones to load the bones with compression, the bones have no problem withstanding that. But if you take a bone and you rub the 2 bone surfaces to get together against each other, bone is not good at taking that force, right? So just like the way a sheet of paper, if you pull it, it's pretty strong. It doesn't tear very easily, but if you tear it, right, it just rips easily. So different materials have different resistances to different types of load. Now, cartilage is kind of a fascinating tissue, right? Because cartilage is actually very resilient to compressive forces, but it is also resilient to shearing forces. It's actually also resilient to tension forces. All the forces cartilage is very resilient to. But if it's such a resilient tissue, how come it breaks down all the time? Is because cartilage is not resilient to combined forces of compression and shearing. So if you're just shearing, just rubbing, cartilage is great because it's smooth and it's slippery and it rubs on each other. And it's good at compression. But once you compress the cartilage and then rub, that's when it starts to break down. And it's this combined compression and shearing together that creates arthritis. And if we can learn how we do that and then how to undo that, you can change your arthritis pain, change your whole condition. So it's this combined compression and shearing. Just said that. Okay, very good. All right, so that's the $1 million question, the $1 billion question, really, because it's billions of dollars that we spend on arthritis every year in this country. So how do we reduce combined compressive and shearing forces? So now gravity is acting upon us all the time. We can't escape gravity, no matter, maybe in a pool to some degree, you can get out of it. But for the most part, we're land-dwelling creatures. Gravity is having this impact on our body. We can't get away from it, right? So compression, the compression of gravity cannot be eliminated from normal daily function. So we just have to make sure that we are meeting that compressive force in a way that is healthy. So that means that we have to reduce the shearing forces of movement. So if we have pain going up and down the stairs or getting out of a chair in the knee, that means that the knee is finding not only the compression from gravity, but also shearing at the same time. And I'm going to teach you today how to reduce that shearing force and reduce your pain. So you have to, so in order to be able to do that, and this is the tricky part, and this is why people don't talk about it, because it's nuanced and it's complicated. It's real simple to say, you're too old, you're too heavy, you're too weak, whatever it is, and put the blame back on you. But really, none of that is true. What really is if you can identify your movement pattern, if you can identify the way that you specifically are adding a shearing force to your joint when you're trying to unload, when you're trying to load that compression, if you can figure that out and learn how to retrain it, you will change what you feel. You will change your function. You will be stronger and you will be more comfortable. Right? Now, everyone's movement patterns and preferences are unique to themselves. So that's another complicated thing, is I can't just say, do this thing and everybody's going to feel better. It would be nice if I could. It would make my job easier and make you happier. But the reason that we can't do that is because everyone's got their own unique set of patterns. So there's not just this one exercise. So when somebody meets up with me in a coffee shop and they find out I'm a physical therapist, they tell me, what's the exercise I can do to help my knees? I can't give them an honest, good answer because I don't know them. Right. And so I'm going to teach you a little bit how to get to know yourself a little bit better and how you can make those changes on your own. And those changes will be long lasting because they're unique to you. They are bespoke. So when you understand how you move as an individual, right, that's an ongoing process because it changes throughout our life, but it is fascinating and it is powerful. And it's what I've committed most of my life to at this point. I hope you find it as interesting as I do. So what I want to get into right now is just how are we doing so far? I've been talking a lot. I just want to give an opportunity. If anybody has any questions about anything I talked about so far, now would be a good time to bring it up before I get into this actual idea of exploring movement. Are we good?
Anybody have anything? I'm looking for hands, Dave.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And
Okay,
for a
I
lot
don't
of you,
see-
that
I don't
might have
see
been
it.
reviewed. No, that's great. Okay, so we're going to get right into the rules of exploring movement. I've been talking about it. Let's get into it. So when we're exploring movement, there are a few ground rules that we have to think about that may be a little bit counterintuitive sometimes. So the first is when you're moving and you're thinking about moving and movement changes, you need to move slowly, right? You can't perceive the subtleties in movements when you're moving quickly. So you really want to take things and slow them down and really kind of dissect them in your own mind. You'll get better at that with practice. But really, it's about being a connoisseur of your own movement, right? If you're an expert wine taster, a wine aficionado, and you get that wine, you don't just throw it back, right? Maybe you do, but the good wine tasters don't, right? They swirl it around, they sniff it, they take a little taste, right? You want to be a connoisseur of your own movement. Next is avoid pain. Pain is not our friend. We are not in a no pain, no gain scenario. Pain is interesting. Pain is information, but we're not trying to drive into pain. So when we're learning how to retrain movement, we're trying to learn how to train the brain and body to move outside of that painful paradigm. So if you're feeling pain when you do something, first you have to make every accommodation to be completely comfortable in your starting position. If it's sitting, if it's lying down, whatever it is, and you want to be comfortable in your starting position. And then if you do encounter pain throughout the movement, which is inevitable, it will happen, be curious about that, not fearful. Pain is your brain telling your body that you're just doing something that's irritating the tissue. And if the movement hurts, do less movement or do different movement or explore that and see, how can I make this pain worse? How can I make this pain better? Sometimes it's hard to figure out how to make pain less, make the pain more, just increase that pain. And then do the opposite and you can decrease the pain. So really we're trying to avoid painful scenarios when we're doing this work. And finally, we want to let go, and this is trouble for some people, myself included, we want to let go of the ambitious goal-oriented mindset. So if I say try to assume a certain position and your body doesn't easily go into that position, don't fight for it. Don't strain. Don't do everything you can because that's what I said is the way to go. You have to allow yourself to be who you are, not strive for whatever you think you should be or what I say you should be. Your body moves a certain way and it got that way for great wisdom. Every issue that you have was a solution to a problem at some point. And so we have to respect that wisdom and just move within your ability level and allow yourself to be imperfect. It's all right. We all are, as much as it may bother us. All right, so we're gonna get into it, right? So that's enough of just sitting and talking. So we're just gonna explore sitting, and I just put these up because we think of sitting as a pretty static, pretty kind of motionless or thoughtless activity oftentimes. But there are a lot of strategies to sitting. And so if we look at the gentleman on the left and how he's supporting himself, and he's got a little tilt to one side, shoulders one side, head the other side, legs crossed, 1 foot on the ground. Or if we've got this, this forlorn model in the middle, with a little bit of a slouch, head forward, or you've got this yogi with this upright posture. So there's all different ways that we can sit, and there are all different ways that we assume a sitting position throughout the day. It is dynamic. We make changes based on what we need. And so let's take a moment and explore sitting, where we are, where we're at, what creates stress, and how we can unload that stress. Okay, so I'm going to unshare my screen now for a moment, just so I can see as many of you as possible. And we'll get into some sitting work. And then we'll talk a little bit more about retraining movement, and then we'll do a little sit to stand because I think we have good time today. All right, so, all right, we're ready to work. So first thing I want you to do is just find yourself in your chair and just take a moment and just sit in a relaxed, comfortable position. Just whatever it is, that's fine. Just your go-to. Don't try to perform. Don't be good. Whenever I say the word posture, people stiffen up. All right, so just be where you are. Now, I want you to take your focus, your attention of your mind, and I want you to put it right at your butt, right where you're contacting the chair, okay? And now your pelvis has two platforms, two bones, right? The bones that you sit on. They have two platforms that contact the surface, and then behind that, there's the tailbone, okay? And so I want you to get a sense of how your butt bones and or your tailbone contact the chair. And so if you're in a more of a slouchy position, like a lot of us find, you'll feel that the weight, the pressure is on the back third or the back half of your sit bones, and you start to sit on your tailbone a little bit. And for some people, that's their go-to. For a lot of people, that's their go-to. This kind of slouchy sit back on the tailbone. And then there are other people who are a little bit more arched or upright or forward, and they might sit on the center or even the front third of their sit bones. And if they do that, they get a little bit more arch in the back. They get a little bit more of a forward lean. And they start to get more pressure on the backs of the thighs and less pressure or no pressure on that tailbone. So I'm going to just scoot back a little bit, lower my camera so you can see my imperfect posture for a moment, right? And so if I roll it forward. All right, I got my rolly chair so I can move back and forth easy. So if I'm sitting, I'm just gonna sit on the edge of the chair so you can see me. So if I get into this slouch position, right, I start to roll into the back half of my sit bones, the back third of my sit bones, and my tailbone starts to take stress and it rounds my low back. Right? Or if I get into that arched position, I start to roll onto the front third of my sit bones and I take that pressure in the back of the thigh. And so what I want you to do now is I want you to see if you can explore those sit bones. Can we find the back third? Can we find the center? Can we find the front third? And can we move back and forth? Now, when you're going back and forth, I want you to think about your body moving in a more up and down position than a forward and back position. So now my camera's not long enough, so you can't see my pelvis, but if I slouch, I come down, and if I arch, I come up, but I'm not doing this. I'm not trying to roll my whole body back and forth. I'm just kind of, When I do it with people in the clinic, I put a hand on their head and I squish them. And when I squish them down, they get into that slouch position, right? And that would make, so if I squish them down, they would get from here to this slouch position. So I want you to explore this idea of rolling forward and backward and kind of just getting to know your sit bones a little bit better, right? How do we go from slouch to arch? And I want in your mind to just kind of make a mental map of those sit bones. See if you can feel the nuances, see if you can feel the contours, see if you can feel, does your body prefer, do you have a preference for one direction or the other direction, right? Can we go back? Can we go forward? Okay. And now, after you're done kind of rocking that up and down, that forward and back with your pelvis, I want you to zoom in, just kind of zone in on the center. So kind of hone that down from this large amplitude, make that amplitude smaller, and see if you can find just the center point of your sit bone. And that center point of your sit bone is the best base for sitting. All right. It is the position that is going to be least strenuous on the rest of your body, on your back, on your hips, on your neck. And so what I want you to think about now, if you find that center point, right where that center point is, wherever it feels, I want you to push it down into the surface of the chair. And this is a little funny to think about, but we're actually going to take that center of the sit bone and we're going to press down into the center of into the chair, into the surface of the chair. And you're going to feel that when you press the center of your sit bones down, it's going to elongate you from the top of your head. Okay. This idea of pressing down will help you rise up, right? If we're pushing down on a surface, we will have an opposite direction to rise up. Now, I'm just going to caution people, the ambition mindset people here, when they rise up, they're going to be big chest, big head. We're not trying to be bold. We're not trying to be in any specific position. We just want to feel that the spine is elongating, that when we push down from the sit bones, we rise up, but not necessarily forward or back. We're not trying to lift our chin and our head. Wherever you land, that's where you land. That's fine. But just find this idea of pushing down through the center of your sit bone and then rising up through the top of your head and elongating your spine. Right now, maybe a few of you are thinking like, oh, nice, but this is impossible. I'm never going to sit this way. Thanks, no thanks. Okay, and that's all right. I got you. I'm not asking you to sit in that position. I'm asking you to be able to find that position, to understand that position, and to understand that that position is the position of the least amount of strain on your joints, the least amount of strain on your back, on your neck, on your hips. However, it is not the easiest position to attain. It may be an extremely fatiguing position. It requires a lot of consumption of energy, and that's why we don't sit like that all the time. So we wouldn't want to sit in that position all the time, but we don't want to sit in the other position all the time, right? In that regular position. So we maintain upright and balance through basically two mechanisms. One is that we rest on tension, right? So if I slouch, I'm resting on the tension of the ligaments of my spine and the tissues around my spine. And the good news about that, what's great about that, is it doesn't require a lot of energy, right? I can just rest and my muscles don't have to work, right? That's the great part. But the bad part is tension over time creates strain, right? Prolonged tension creates strain. If I held my finger back like this for 20 minutes, it would start to hurt. If you're sitting in a slouch position or in a too far forward position, you're going to find that strain over time. Now, the other way that we hold ourselves up is through muscle work. And so if we can use our muscles to hold our body in a mid-range position, we slack the tissues. Now, all that tissue that was tense when we were when we were slouching, now becomes slackened and then it's rested. So it's like taking my finger here and then getting to do this a little bit. Oh, that feels so much nicer. Okay. So we need to be able to find both. When we get tired, it's okay to slouch. But at some point when that tissue gets strained, we need to be able to find that other position, that upright position. We will inevitably regress to your preferred position after seconds. It usually takes less than a minute to regress to that. But getting out of that position frequently is going to reduce the amount of strain on the tissues that get strained by the way you sit. And that's going to give you longevity in sitting. So the goal is not to sit in this perfectly upright position all the time. That's silly. That's setting you up for failure. That's impossible, in fact. It's not how long you sit in this position. It's how frequently you return to this position that will determine the longevity of your sitting and reduce the amount of strain on your body. So if I'm sitting in my go-to, right, my imperfect position, I'll see if you can, is basically like this. Like this is my happy place, right? This is where I'm writing my emails. This is what I look like, right? And over time, this will be straight. If I sit like this for 2 hours, I will be unhappy. I will not be good to be around, right? But if I sat for 2 hours and for 10 minutes, after 10 minutes, I did this for 30 seconds and then went here for 10 minutes. And then I was here for 30 seconds and then here for 10 minutes. That is going to reduce all of that accumulated strain in my body. And any arthritic joints won't take as much tension. The ligaments won't take as much tension. And the muscles can sustain it for that time. So that is the strategy to happy and brilliant sitting. Okay. And so the most important thing is to be able to figure out where the center of those sit bones are. Okay. When you know where those sit bones are, you will learn how to then find them, press through them to rise up, to get out of your tension sitting position. And then you just go back to whatever you're doing. You will inevitably melt your way back down to whatever your preferred position is. And that is great. That is fine. That's your unique position. Have at it, but don't live there, right? Visit there for a little while. And then if you feel a pain, right? If you're sitting and you feel any type of pain, that should be an automatic trigger in your brain to go check in. Where am I? How far am I off my center, my sit bones? Let me refine them just for a moment, right? Anytime you feel pain, first thought should be, where am I sitting? Think about your butt. Pain in the butt, right? Anytime you think about pain, you should be thinking, if you're sitting, you're thinking about your butt, okay? And then you reset and you melt your way back down. And then eventually, before you feel pain, your brain is gonna start to perceive strain. So strain is the precursor to pain. And oftentimes we live in a position where we're under strain for long, that it feels like normal. It feels like home. We're gonna recalibrate that. So strain feels like strain, not like your normal resting position. And then when you start to perceive strain, then the strain triggers you to make that change. And then when you're making that change, when you first feel strain, then you never even have to get into the pain situation. And then you're really doing good things. Then you can go to the theater, right? Then you can go to a restaurant and not have to worry about, having to get up before the main courses come out because something hurts or something's stiff. So it can really make an impactful change if you know how to make these changes in sitting, right? So that is your fundamental sitting kind of retraining challenge. And it is a challenge, and it requires time and practice, just like anything else. There's one other sitting exercise I want to get into, but first I want to open the floor for any questions that come to that, because I know I'm introducing this kind of new concept of movement retraining and everything. So I'm happy to field any questions anyone has at this time. Yeah, Virginia.
I have not been diagnosed with arthritis, but I have problems with pelvic misalignment. And I read that we move around a lot, like instead of just moving in the chair, isn't it better to get up and do something else to keep that pelvis aligned? And I don't know how much sitting has to do with it, but I know if I sit a long time at the computer, that's when I think I wind up with misalignment and my PT has to straighten me out. So that I'm interested in.
Absolutely. So getting up, so yeah, changing what you're doing completely is another way of reducing strain, right? So if we're in a position of strain, getting up and walking around and coming back is another mechanism to reduce strain. But one, that's not always feasible if you're at the theater, or that you don't want to get up and walk around. If you're on a plane, you don't always have that opportunity. But two, this is a small thing that you can do that will increase that the longevity, will increase your resilience to sitting over time. And it's really the difference between this and this. So I'm not saying don't get up and walk around, and I'm not saying you should sit for 2 hours at a time. What I'm saying is you have the ability to sit for longer with less strain. So if you can identify a position of strain and then find a way that you can sit and take that strain off, even if it's just for a short period of time, even just for 30 seconds, you start to reset the clock a little bit on how much your tissues can take. And then when you get back into that position, you'll be okay. So I'm all for getting up and walking around. This is just another tool and a smaller tool, kind of a more gentle touch to trying to solve that same problem.
Why doesn't movement irritate the joint?
Why does movement irritate the joint?
Why
So,
doesn't it? Why doesn't it? You say to change
Oh,
position. That's a lot of
yes.
moving back and forth. Why doesn't
Yeah.
that irritate your joint?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the joints will be irritated when they're not loaded in the way that they are most resilient, okay? And so we're not looking for a ton of movement, right? We're just looking to reposition yourself so that you are not, that you're putting the compressive forces of gravity straight down through the bones with getting less shearing force, less rubbing force through there. Movement itself, especially if it's comfortable, actually stimulates the production of synovial fluid. So movement is lubricating. If you want to be stiff, don't move for a long time, right? That's why you feel stiff in the morning, right? Because you haven't been moving much and you get up and everything's creaky, and then you move around and things start to loosen up. That's kind of the essence of the warm-up. If you have an acutely painful episode, right? If you're dealing with an acute injury, all movement might be uncomfortable. So that is a bit of a different situation. But I would say that just like we went back to that first slide, if you're feeling pain, you're probably trying to do too much. You're probably trying to find these big end ranges. Just move smaller. Just find it's such subtle. It's such nuanced. Just this idea of pushing down into the surface to rise up doesn't have to take, for me, if I do it right now, this is me not pushing, this is me pushing, right? That's the difference. One, gravity is pushing me. The other one, I'm pushing back against gravity, right? It doesn't have to be a big, full-on movement. So if movement is painful, you can always slice this movement thinner and thinner, but still get benefit.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Can you move sideways in a chair, sort of a different way, or, sideways, back and forth? Is that,
I'm sorry, say that again?
is moving back and forth, your whole torso, does that help too, or?
Yeah, so there's lots of different ways to move. Now twisting inherently is strenuous on the body, right? And so I wouldn't do that. So I have patients that come to me that pain or whatever, and they tell me, oh, my desk is set here, but my computer is set here, right? So my desk is set this way, my computer is set this way, and they spend half the day twisting and typing, and that's bad, right? And so anything in short measure is fine. Slouching in short measure is fine. Upright in short measure is fine. Twisting in short measure is fine. But it's the sustained, it's the prolonged positions over time, unchanging, that create strain, and that strain over time creates inflammation, pain, and eventually joint breakdown. But we can talk about other positions, Virginia, that we'll do right after this one.
We have a question from Manjula. Manjula, can you unmute yourself?
Okay, here we go. So
Yeah.
I tend to sit on the on just half the chair. I don't lean against the back of the chair. Is that strenuous?
No, so that's your preferred sitting position, you mean?
Yes. I find myself always sitting in the front half of the chair.
Yes. So you're in the minority of people who are almost like, I call them almost a front sloucher, right? So people who prefer not to use the backrest, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they tend to lean forward and they rest on the tension of the arch of their low back and the crease of their hips. And that is a different type of strain than the slouch position. Again, nothing wrong with not using the back of the chair, but you're going to be more inclined, like most people, that you're going to rest into this position. And so you're probably going to find yourself sitting on the backs of your thighs and on the front third of your sit bones. And so what you need to do is you need to find your way back a little bit onto that center sit bone and upright, and you can still be off the chair. That is okay. In fact, if you can sit without the backrest, you are creating more stability from your own body, and that's a good thing. And actually, that brings up a great point. I want to talk about that for a little bit, chairs. So if we think about how can we best use the chair to help us, right? So when we're getting into the chair, the further your butt is away from the back of the chair and you use that backrest, the more rounding or stress that's going to be put through the chair. So what this is okay to be here for a few minutes or for a little while, but long term is going to be rough. So the best way to use the backrest, and this might help you as well, Majula, is I have my patients actually sit on the backrest. They put their butt on the backrest and then they slide down until they hit the seat. And that makes you find that center sit bone position and lets the back hit the backrest in a way that's much more aligned and less slouchy. Now, over time, usually they'll find their way back into this position. We all kind of melt and migrate here. And then when they want to do that reset, they just come on back, get way deep in the chair, and then find that position again. So you don't have to use the backrest, but if you do use the backrest, you want to use it appropriately and as much to your benefit as possible. I usually suggest, like, if somebody's using the backrest of a chair, or when I'm doing it, especially if I'm driving, this happens. I think, imagine that this backrest magically disappeared right now, right? Would I fall into the back seat because I'm not holding my body up, or would I be able to catch myself? The more pressure I have into the backrest, the more I'm kind of abdicating support to the surfaces instead of to myself. I want to be pushing down to rise up. I don't want to have so much pressure back. So you should use that backrest, but it should be a gentle pressure onto the backrest. Again, unless you're sitting in a recliner and relaxing and you want to be in that position. If you're on the beach in a lounge chair, have at it, have your pina colada, no problems there. But if we're sitting at a desk or attempting upright sitting, we can use the backrest to our advantage or disadvantage, depending on how we use it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other questions?
I see Judith here.
Yeah.
Have a little one. I've always been told to keep 2 feet on the ground when I'm sitting and not to cross my legs by every physical therapist I've had over the years. And you're not necessarily advocating that.
Well, I'm a little less rigid. I think that you gotta live your life, and so 2 feet on the ground is optimal because it gives you more support. But we don't need to be in any one position all the time. There's no perfect position. Despite what they say, there's no perfect posture. There's no perfect position. Our bodies are designed to be fluid and to be moving. So if crossing your legs is comfortable and you can sit with your legs crossed in a way that doesn't put strain through your body, then you can cross your legs. But don't cross your legs all the time, every time you sit. It's about variety, right? So it's about having the option and the ability to do different things. Variety is resilience. When our bodies become stiff and they funnel movement into one position or one movement all the time, that movement gets overdone, and that's where problems come from. But there's no movement that in and of itself, or position that in and of itself is inherently bad. It's just being forced into that movement and that movement only, having no other choices, that's bad. So if you feel comfortable crossing your legs, cross your legs. But if then sitting becomes painful in your hip or in your back, you have to be able to find an alternative and maybe reduce the amount of time or find a different way to sit. Even a different way to sit with your legs crossed can be helpful.
Great, thank you.
And so, you know what? That's a great segue, Judith. I appreciate that, because now we're going to talk about the side a little bit. All right. So we talked about the front back, right? So that was rotating the pelvis forward, rotating the pelvis backward. That's moving your body up and down. But we also tend to have a lot of side preferences. So like I know for me, if I have a choice, it's always off to this right side. My body loves this. And then if I do this, my body's like, that feels weird. I don't like that. But this, no problem, right? And so we often have a lot of preferences with position. And I would say Judith probably, when she crosses her legs, she probably crosses the same leg on top of the other one all the time and shifts to one side. That's the way it usually goes. We have one side for preference. We dominate with that side, but try crossing your legs the other way and see how your body accommodates that. It might feel very awkward or foreign. So something that we can do, we're going to come back to our start position. So we're going to come off the backrests of the chair a little bit. We're going to sit so you feel solid on the chair. And we're just going to do the same thing that we started with, that kind of slouching to the tailbone, rolling forward to the backs of the thighs, and then just kind of honing in on that center of the sit bones, whatever feels like you're comfortable, and that's the key, comfortable tallest point. Find those sit bones, push them down so you feel like you're easily taller. Not the most that you can be where you can't breathe or talk and you're under stress, right? But if I said you had to sit there for 20 minutes, like, oh, that's enough, right? I could be here, but it's not worth it, right? I have to do 50% more energy to get 5% more height. Not worth it, right? So go to what's easy. And then I want you to think about both of those sit bones individually, right? So now you can feel both of those sit bones sitting on the chair, pushing on the surface. I want you to imagine if I were to take two bathroom scales and put one under each sit bone, right? Would one of them read more than the other, right? Are we putting more pressure? You inherently have more pressure on one sit bone than the other sit bone, just in your intuitive, I'll call it natural, but you're familiar, you're comfortable, your first choice sitting position. And just get a sense within yourself. There's no right or wrong answer. Remember, your body is your body. It made the decisions to get to you through great wisdom over time. And just get a sense. We're just learning about ourselves. Do you have a preference for one cheek over the other cheek? If we had those scales there, would the scale say 60% right, 40% left? Or would it say 32% left and 68% right? Right? Get a sense of where you're at. Okay. Now, I want you to just think about if you have a cheek that feels like it's more dominant, that it's easier to sit on, that your body gravitates towards. I want to put your mind into that sit bone. If you feel 50-50, just use your right one. But if you feel like there's any disparity, use the one that you feel like you have a fluency towards or an affluence towards. And then what I want you to do is I want you to put pressure with that sit bone down, but just on that side. And when you do, I'm going to slide back just so you can see me a little bit here. Too far. Okay. And when you put pressure on that side, it's going to, if we push down, I'm going to use my right. If I push down with my right, it's going to lift my ribs and body over to the right. Okay. Now this is a subtle thing, so I want to make sure that you understand. So if I'm working on my right sit bone, what I'm not doing is I'm not leaning. I'm not just tipping over that right side. That's passive. That's easy. That's just gravity taking me over to the right. What I'm doing is I'm taking my right sit bone and I'm driving it down into the surface, so that way my ribs rise up. I'm creating almost a C shape with my body, and my ribs are having an excursion out to the side, but my head is not tipping over to that direction. My head almost maybe tips a little bit in the other direction. So see, can you take that dominant sit bone, that sit bone that you like, can you drive it into the surface in a way that elevates your ribs and body up to the side a little bit? Okay, and we're avoiding this passive shift, this passive lean, and think pressure. So now think about that scale that's underneath your cheek. If you push down on that scale, that reading's going to go up. You're making yourself heavier on that right cheek. Or if I put a sheet of paper underneath that cheek and you don't want me to pull it out, that you're holding it down, right? If I put that winning Powerball ticket underneath your cheek and you have to hold it down, don't let me get at it, right? Hold it down and feel what that feels like. And so you come to that side and then you come back to center and then you come push through there and come back to center, and see how easily, how readily is that sit bone there for you when we have this asymmetric demand. And just play with that and go slowly and smoothly and see, where is it easy? How can I make that movement? How can I put pressure down more easily? How can I find downward pressure. And it's not by doing more. And this is the tough part when I talk about ambition. It's not by pushing harder. It's about finding the coordination, understanding what muscles have to work to push that sit bone down. When that sit bone comes down, if I'm pushing down my right, the left one will come up. The left one will unweight. So if I have a piece of paper under my left side, it should be easy to pull out once I push down my right. The pelvis is just pushing one side down and the other side up, like a little seesaw. All right, very good. Now let's come back to center. All right, now I want you to find the opposite side. So this should be your less dominant side, and this side might be a little bit trickier. And I want you to see what kind of capacity do you have to push that other side down into the surface. So for me, I did it again. Okay, my left side is trickier, right? And so I have to really think, how can I push my left side down to raise my body up? And when I do my left side, even with all my thinking and training and practicing, I do it differently. I push from my thigh. I don't push from my cheek as well. On my right side, no problem. That cheek's there for me. On the left side, I really have to think about it because it's not my intuitive side. So find that less intuitive side or that tricky side and see, can you find a way to press that side down so that your ribs rise up and they create that C shape in the opposite direction. And how much you can do right now is so unimportant. Okay, so we don't care. Nobody's getting a prize. I'm not giving out awards for best left cheek butt pusher into the chair, right? You don't win anything. But what you do figure out is you figure out your preferences. You learn what your body is easily capable of and what it has trouble doing. And if you have trouble on one side, I bet that it's just because your body has kind of forgotten how to access that. And you can retrain that, and that will make you more resilient over time, right? So you don't have to go to the gym, right? You don't have to do jumping jacks, you don't have to do crunches, you don't have to do planks, no Pilates. You can sit in your chair and shift. And let me tell you, when I'm on a flight or if I'm on the train, the subway here in New York, I'm doing this all the time. I'm thinking about, okay, which cheek am I going to use, right? And then before you know it, I'm at my stop, right? You just get in your mind and you go. Or when the subway goes, I'm like, all right, I'm going to use the left cheek to keep myself from rolling into the guy next to me. Now I'm going to use my right cheek, right? And so I'm doing these exercises all the time on the commute. Nobody has to know. It's our secret. And there's those subtleties. So I want you to really find that unintuitive side and see if you can press through that side and find that same support. All right. And if you have asymmetry, then when you sit, it means that you're just naturally going to find that one side. And when you become asymmetrical in that sit, or when you gravitate towards one direction all the time, you will inevitably develop strain somewhere along the way. Something is taking the brunt of that. All right. Now again, be careful that it's not like this. You're not a pendulum going tick-tock back and forth. You're pushing down to rise up. So you're creating almost a C curve by driving down, and make it small, right? We always start doing more than we need to, but it's a small little movement. Okay. So now that's your second check-in with yourself. The first one I think is the most important one, and that's why I teach it first. But that first check-in is just, where am I front to back? I feel pain. Where am I on my sit bones? Find my sit bones. And then the second check-in is, could I be a little bit more on my left by pushing my left down? Or should I be a little bit more on my right by pushing my right down? Or can I do both, right? Am I sitting at the theater? I could do this while I watch the opera, or I watch, a play, or I can come on this side. And then that ability to switch sides now is another point of resilience. It's more variety, so it's more resilience. So you will be able to withstand that position a little bit more. So when you understand your preferences, you're going to know what you gravitate towards, and then you're going to know how you can make a change just to offset some of that pressure. And just for a brief amount of time, 30 seconds, a minute, whatever it is, go back to your old way, and then just do those little resets when you do that. So once you know your preference, you know how to move out of that preference, and you start to do it intuitively. Okay, so that's front to back and side to side. You guys are all expert sitters now. Any questions before I'm going to go back to the share screen and do a couple more slides, and then we'll get to sit to stand, which I know everybody's waiting for. Okay. All right, well, if any insights pop up from that side to side, you know, let me know, we'll get to it. Where are we going? PowerPoint, okay. All right. All right, so when we're doing movement retraining, there's really 4 phases that we go through when we're retraining movement. The first phase is called unconscious inability, right? And that is before we are aware of what our preferences are. So we're unaware of our movement preferences and restrictions. We're just going through life, doing what we do, not really thinking about it like most of us do. And that's where we all start. I don't know how I sit. I just sit. It's fine. And I'm getting through it. That's unconscious inability. But then once we have some awareness and develop that, sometimes we get to a point, and this is, I would say, the most important phase, but the most frustrating phase, is conscious inability. So that's where you can recognize what you're good at and you can recognize your restrictions, but you haven't figured out how to do the thing that you want to do, right? So you're like, oh, I can sit on my right side. I can't sit on my left side so well. I want to get my left side. I can't get to do that. It's conscious. You're conscious of what you can't do, but you're unable to do it. And that's when most people get frustrated. They try to overpower, they do funky things. That's when you need to really slow down, appreciate the fact that you've made a change, appreciate the fact that you have some new awareness, that you learned something about your body, and just tease and just coax. But that movement from unconscious inability to conscious inability is the biggest step towards change. So important, but also often the most frustrating. But then after that, you get to the conscious ability phase. So that's when you know what you want to do and you can get yourself to do it. If you think about it, if you try, if you work at it, you know what it is, but you can only do it when you pay conscious attention, when you put effort in mind and body to practice and do that thing, right? That is conscious ability. And then the holy grail, nirvana, unconscious ability, right? That's what we all want. I want it to be perfect and I don't want to have to think about it. I want it to just work, okay? And that's when you have a healthy movement pattern or joint loading, and that happens automatically. And if you had a side for sitting that was preferential, you have unconscious ability on that side. That side does it automatically, right? We have lots of unconscious ability within our body because we're living upright, functioning human beings, right? And so it's about finding those ones that aren't serving us and then ideally getting to that point of unconscious ability. There's a lot of overlap between these and a lot of gray, but I want you to know that when you're struggling, you're somewhere on this continuum and it's okay. It's just where you are in that journey, and that is all right. Right? So then it's all about pattern building. And so then how do we build patterns? So the more a pattern of movement is repeated, the stronger the neural pathways become. So this is really, it's body work, but it's really brain work. We're really training the brain here. And so the more we do something, the stronger the neural pathways become. So you can see somebody that's done something for a long time and just watch them do it and know that they've done it a ton, right? So look at somebody who's playing a musical instrument. If somebody's been playing for a year or if somebody's been playing for 20 years, you can see it in their movements, right? You can see it and they play. You can see it in the amount of attention they have to pay to what they're doing, right? Imagine brushing your teeth, right? You don't think about it, you just do it. If you brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand, all of a sudden it slows down, it gets clunky, it's not coordinated. Everybody try to brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand tonight and see how different it is. I bet you won't even get through all the teeth. You're like, forget it, I'm going back to the easy side, okay? Or someone who knits, right? They can just knit and they don't have to think, and they can make a sweater and they can do their taxes at the same time or whatever else, all right? So the more you do something, it becomes. So there's this idea that the neurons that fire together wire together, right? That is called Hebb's rule that he published in the Organization of Behavior in 1949. So this is cutting edge information, right? This is information that came out, 70 years ago. Okay, but I think underutilized. So neurons that fire together, the more things work together in the brain, the more they wire together to do the same thing. And that works to our advantage, but sometimes our disadvantage. Because if we have a pattern that's wired together very strongly, that's not serving us well, then it's hard to unwire that and rewire something else. But when we get the good stuff, it's great. And so to create movement patterns, or why does the body create movement patterns? Really, the brain has a very limited capacity for thinking and analysis. So all this analytic thinking and focus, it consumes a lot of energy and processing power. And that's why some of you might be getting a little fatigued right now, right? Because we sit and we think about ourselves, and just thinking consumes a lot of energy. and it consumes a lot of resources of the body. So we've come up with this shortcut of having these patterns that we just do automatically without having to override the analytical thinking process and then just letting us do what we do, which is great. It allows us to function because I have to think about each tooth when I brushed it. It would be unbearable, right? But if those patterns don't serve us or they become dysfunctional or painful, then we wind up with a problem. And since you can only focus on one thing at a time, if we're always focused on our movements, we'd never be able to do anything else. And so your brain opts to conserve energy and processing power over movement efficiency. That's when people ask me, well, why don't I just do it in the best way? How come it's not automatic? Because your brain is doing what's most familiar, excuse me, because that's what's most energy efficient. And so it's taking energy efficiency over movement efficiency. And so these patterns allow us to achieve ends through subconscious means. And that's important for us. Right? So then how do we change movement patterns? So if we've got these ingrained movement patterns, how do we change them? So first, in order to change them, you have to move consciously, right? If you're not conscious about your movement when you're doing it, you're going to do what's old and familiar. That doesn't mean you have to be conscious every moment of every day. This is specifically for when you're training, when you're taking the time to try to do something different, right? You have to move consciously. And to move consciously, you have to move slowly, right? We can't just, okay, let me find my left sit bone, push, 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 push. I get 10 done and I'm done, right? So I tell my patients, take 5 minutes of uninterrupted time to get into your mind and feel. If I say do 10, though, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, I'm done. That's not the way you want to do it. So you have to move slowly. You have to move thoughtfully, right? So you have to really be thinking about what you're doing as you're doing it, thinking about how you're moving, thinking about how to free up that movement. And you want to be comfortable. If you're putting yourself into pain, your brain will get a negative association with that movement, and it will not want to do that movement again. So we're training comfort, even if it's small, even if it's imperfect, we're inching to the desirable versus going through pain to get there. And then we have to introduce novelty to movement. So what you're doing has to be new. It has to be something that the brain doesn't already have a pattern for, right? And so we do things in different ways. So when I'm telling you to try to move in this way, it's something that you haven't thought of before probably. And so therefore the brain has to rewire to figure that thing out, right? So achieving the same movement goal in a different way. And then finally getting different neurons to wire together. That's the goal. And then when you repeat that novel movement, it becomes more familiar. When it becomes more familiar, it goes into your toolbox or your movement vocabulary, and then it gets into that holy grail of unconscious ability. All right, I've gone for an hour and 15. Do you guys want me to do a little sit to stand work here? Or are you, yeah, okay. So we'll go with sit to stand. And we'll think about that. So for sit to stand, what we're going to think about, I'm just going to move this down, where we're sitting. So for sit to stand, there's a couple of things. The easiest way to get up is always to get to the edge of the surface of what you're sitting on, okay? You want to get, the goal for sit to stand is not about up. Most people think about up. The goal is about forward. How do we get our center over our base? So right now, my base is my butt. I want my base to be my feet. How do I get my hips or my butt over my feet? The first thing is to bring them as close together as possible in line. So if my butt's way back here and my feet are all the way up here, right? There's a long distance for my butt to travel. It's going to be real hard to get up. But if I pull my feet back underneath me and I get my butt to the edge, now my butt's only a few inches away from being over my feet. That's going to be much simpler. So the first easiest thing you can do for yourself is to move to the front of the seat and pull your feet back as much as you can. If you have a knee that doesn't bend so easily or is a little bit painful, you can leave that one straight, but bend the one that feels more comfortable. Okay. And so my friend who was talking about using the arms of the chair to get up, the reason why he's using the arms of the chair to get up is not to get up, it's to get forward. So when people use the arms or when they're forced to use the arms, right, what they're doing is they're not pushing themselves up so much as they're pushing themselves forward over their feet. they're using the arms to do that. They're not pushing up because then they're stuck on the hands. So you use the arms to push yourself forward. And that is a fine strategy. There's nothing wrong with that. It's nice to have the ability to stand up without it, but hey, I use the arm rests when I have. All right. So the goal is to get forward. Now we're going to talk about how to get forward, but first it's good to know what the goal is before we get into the achievement part. Okay. So now the question is, how do we get from the seat to the feet, right? So if my base is here, so now we're going to find the front of those sit bones again, right? And as we go forward, I want you to feel how the weight starts to come off of your butt and onto your feet. Okay. So now we're going to do is lean. If your body is rigid and you lean forward, you're going to feel that the weight comes off of the chair a little bit and onto the feet. And the more we're transitioning from the chair to the feet, the better that we're doing. Now, here's a tricky thing. If when you lean forward, your back rounds towards that tailbone, you're going to feel that the weight goes back into the chair. If when you lean forward, you arch your back, you're going to feel that the weight goes more into your feet. So people that have difficulty arching their back, or if they have limitations in the spine, arching the back, they're going to have a tougher time getting up. So somebody who has a rounded spine, no matter how far they lean forward, they're always going to be backwards in the chair. Okay. So when you get forward as much as you can, let your back arch, let your belly come out. Okay. Then the next step, and this is the hardest part, and this is where everybody struggles. The next step is to lean forward and unweight the chair so that way you can weight your feet. The hardest part of standing up is not standing up. The hardest part of standing up is getting from the seat to the feet. This movement right here is the hardest part of standing up. Right? And that is something that you can practice. You can practice, and if you have trouble doing it, take another chair and put it in front of you and use your hands to help you and practice going from the seat to your hands and then back to the chair. Up to here and then back to the chair. Use another chair in front of you to help you if that's difficult for you. Once you've gotten the weight over the feet, you just straighten out your legs and stand up. That's actually a piece of cake. Okay, so we come over. When you stand up, the only thing to think about is pulling the knees backwards in space when you stand up. If the knees go forward in space when you stand up, it's hard on the knees. So as you come forward off the feet, off the seat, onto your feet, then you're going to pull the knees backwards to bring yourself up. I see a lot of people bobbing up and down, looking good. Now, when we're practicing this, if we're really truly practicing, what we're trying to do is eliminate momentum, and that is difficult. So that little transition that I did is very hard to do. So what we do is we jump over it, right? So that looks like this. So we get to this point and it's tricky. So we go, huh, right? Or we sit down, we get to here, and then we fall into the chair. That little area between that getting up and falling down, that's the hardest place. If you can work in that zone, everything else will become easy.
Is
Right?
it okay to put your hands on your thighs?
Hands on the knees is great. That's just like hands on a chair. It's very similar. Yeah, but you put the hands on the knees for support, hands on the thighs for support to help bring yourself forward. So you want to move slowly and you want to take away momentum. When we're training slow. If you can do it slowly, I promise you can do it quickly. No question. If you can do it slow is control. When we're moving fast, usually we're trying to avoid something. Usually there's some deficit that we're jumping over. All right, slow is control. So if you can do it slowly, you'll be able to do it quickly. So we want to feel, how do we get just off the seat onto the feet? And then we push down through the heels, pull the knees back to rise up. That's the easy point.
Can you scooch out of the back position forward before you do that? Can you just do that by scooching like a snake sort of?
Absolutely. You kind of butt walk your way to the edge of the chair, right? Or you can use the armrests and push yourself forward any way you get there, but you want to get your butt as far to the edge of the chair as you can and your feet as comfortably far under you as you can. So that way you only have to move your butt just a short distance to get over your feet. If your butt and your feet are real far apart, that's a long way to travel. That's a difficult way to stand up. So butt to the edge of the chair, feet underneath you, and then you find that forward lean. When you forward lean, you'll find the weight transition off of the chair onto your feet. If you add a little arch to your back, you'll transition even further forward onto the feet. And then that difficult part is just that rock from the seat to the feet. You can just do this. This is an exercise in and of itself. If you can do this, you'll be golden. Because if you can do this, I promise you can do that, right? And then the way down is the same thing. We want to find our way down. And how slowly can we sit and touch the chair and then go back? So that's sit to stand in 7 minutes.
Terrific, terrific.
All right. And so all those things are things that you can play with. I have some sit to stand videos on my website. If you want to check out my website, arthritis help, HELP.info, not .com, .info. And you can find, I've got like 50, 60 different videos there of a variety of qualities from when I started to I'm getting pretty good at them now, I think. So yes, you have a question.
So Dave, I haven't been able to sit up for a year or two.
Okay.
Stand.
Great
Go from
antics.
sit to stand.
Right.
Sit to stand on, I had to push on the armrest or whatever. I just did it. Just did it 3 times.
I'm
Now
gonna
I
send
gotta
you a
keep doing
testimonial sheet.
But I gotta get a new habit in my brain.
That's exactly right. It's brain training. And it's not because you're too weak. It's not because you're too old. It's not because you're too anything. It's
Well, I
because you
thought it
didn't.
was that.
Well, that's the lies that you've been told. And that's unfortunate, right? And so now you are, you had the ability within you the whole time. And you just figured out a better way. You solved the problem differently. And the way you decide to solve the problem now is more efficient than the way you decide to solve the problem before. So you just learned a new trick and now you're implementing it, and that's awesome.
I'm not ready to skip rope.
Well, that's next year when they bring me back.
Yeah, no,
We'll bring you
I'm-
back for skip rope. We'll bring you
Thank
back.
you, sir.
Why don't we take, let's say 2 or 3 more questions, and then we will let Dr. Sofer go.
Yeah.
2 or 3 more, anything? I have a question about chairs, but I want to leave that for the very, very end.
Sure.
Nan?
Oh, how do we find you on YouTube?
Oh, I will, you know what? That is a great question. I'm so bad at doing these things. Can I, Lori, can I just send you all different ways that you can find me and you can email it to the group? Is that something that you can do?
Yeah, I don't have everyone's name, so hold on a second. Kate, I want you to do a screenshot, please, so we've got everybody here.
Lori, I
Yeah,
took
let me-
attendance, so we've got a list of everybody.
Perfect, Abby, thank you. Yes,
Yep.
I will send
Is that
everybody.
something you could do?
whatever you
All right,
send me.
I'll send them my links to my YouTube, my Facebook, my website. And you can, all those resources, lots of free resources on there. I am working on a full course, like a 6-week, kind of advanced course on managing arthritis specifically for the knees, which I'm putting the finishing touches on now, but when that's available, that's going to be a paid course because there's a lot of content in there. But there's lots of free stuff on the site, but I'll let you know when that comes out as well.
You are very generous, and we appreciate your time and your expertise and for sharing it with us. Is there any last question?
I
Well,
have one.
Ginny, now you've had 3 questions.
Okay,
We're gonna have
sorry.
number 4. Go ahead.
You want it? Oh, which is healthier for your body, a soft chair or a hard chair? Or does it-
So the problem with soft chairs, is that it's very difficult to find support from the base, right? They're too soft. And so it's hard to hold yourself up. So you're more likely to conform or slump back down. Excuse me one second. You're gonna get to see my apartment a little bit here because I need to plug my laptop in. So you get an insider's view. I don't want to lose you. So the soft chairs are typically
Wait,
a little bit more challenging to find. So that's why soft couches are a little bit more challenging because they're kind of going to sink you in. So usually something that's more firm, you want a little cushion just to soften the impact, right? But something soft is really going to sink you down. It's going to be harder to get out of. And if you are on a couch, then you want to find your way off the seat to the edge of the couch. Usually you have that frame at the edge. You're going to use that as the edge of the couch and try to get up from there. But couches are tougher because they're softer and they're usually lower. So the lower your seat, the more challenging it is to get out of. So you can do things like put a pillow underneath your seat or cushions to elevate the seat height, and that'll make sit to stand easier as well.
What's
Yes.
your wall say? What does the
Oh.
wall say behind us?
It's what we have here is a failure to communicate, which is
Yes.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Bold, very bold.
maybe not the best for a webinar background, but
No,
I tried to use my other artwork
you
instead.
communicated very well.
Dave, I'm going to be emailing you to ask for recommendations for new office chairs for the staff here at Home Haven. We are overdue because we sit
Okay.
on chairs for 6-8 hours a day,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes we're not comfortable at all. So I will email you, and if you have some
Okay.
good tips, I'll share them with the group as well if people are looking for chairs.
I will do my best.
Okay, thank you.
Well, David, we have kept you for an hour and a half.
Yes, thank you
Um,
so much.
It was
Yeah,
my
and
pleasure, really.
this-
Thank you for the opportunity.
And it's been entertaining. You have a
Yeah.
great sense of humor,
Thank
and, and one cheek butt to the other cheek butt.
you. There you go. Look at you move. Look at you going, Pat.
I don't think any of us felt intimidated.
Good.
So
Thank
it was delightful, and I really do
Thank you.
appreciate the fact that you were able to share this time with us.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are part or work with ILR, remember David does have 3 programs coming up in early April, and they're all Zoom. So if you want more of David, then check ILR and sign up for his course there. But I want to second Lori's comment too. You're being very generous with all the work that you've done in helping to educate people with movement issues, even if it's arthritis or something else.
It's my
And I
pleasure.
think that's a real professional quality that I want to applaud you for,
Thank
David.
you. Thank you. And when I
And I-
hear someone like, I assume your husband, say something like that, that's all the reward I need. That's
Yeah, and he's so excited. Look, I just did it.
I want to share to them, I want to say to the members, if you liked this program, tell your friends and we will get them the recording, okay? So feel free to just let everyone know that it was so helpful and we'll get it out to them.
And if David is willing, we'll have him come back, next
Absolutely.
year.
Yeah,
Because
it'll be fun.
I think this is something you need to practice.
Absolutely. Yes.
We'll have a test next year.
And maybe, maybe next year we do a little more instead of the cheek and do more of the getting up from the chair
Or
or.
sit to stand. Sure. We could do sit to
Yeah.
stand. We could do stairs. We could do all sorts of things.
Yeah,
Stairs,
Okay.
stairs.
There's,
A
stairs.
lot to tackle. A lot to tackle.
Yeah.
But also I want to do what you guys want. So if you guys have ideas or suggestions, please email me, let me know. You don't have to wait till next year because I'm making new videos for folks all the time. So I'll give you like a 5 or 7 minute video tip on whatever you suggest. That's what inspires me to put out new content. So anything you want to know more about, just shoot me an email and I'll try to build a video. I'll put it on my website for you and the rest of the world.
Dave, if you ever come through New Haven, you have friends in New Haven.
Good to
Okay?
know. We'll go to Frank Pepe's. We'll get some pizza.
All right. meet you there.
We'll have dinner around the table and show you how we can stand up. Thank you, David.
My pleasure.
This has
Thank
been
you.
good, and
Thank
we
you.
will hopefully see you again.
Okay,
Thank you
yeah.
so much.
Good.
Take care. My
Bye-bye,
Bye,
pleasure.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All
sir.
right,
Thank
guys.
you all for coming, all of our members,
Yeah.
friends. Thank you.
I'm gonna
Bye-bye.
see.
Bye.
Yeah.
There we go.